60 some people in the group now. We got 11 people on the dashboard. Come on. I get a better open rate when I send an email. No, just kidding. All right. So how to set qualified appointments that meet. And here we go with our 7-minute timer. And Wally, I'm going to lean on you to share some of your advice as we run through here also, but let's just be mindful of our time. So the most important thing in any industry, make sure that the person or the people that you're trying to make your presentation to are actually capable and qualified to need, want, use, benefit from whatever service or product you're offering, right? I read a statistic the other day in planning for something else that said that on average in any sales organization, 50% of the people in your database ain't qualified. And so the better that you can get at creating and then second, following a qualifying process every single time, the better you'll get on meet ratio. You know, less appointments will cancel, more appointments will close. You'll find your closing ratio goes through the roof. You're meeting with the right people. A lot of salespeople get frustrated and end up hating sales because they're always trying to sell the wrong person that nobody could sell anyhow. So uncover objections and red flags is the first thing. And we talk about, Wally and I both, how important it is to listen. And that's one of the reasons is if you're listening, you can catch those cues, those red flags that should trigger you to ask an additional question, not ignore it like it wasn't said. Oh, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. So it doesn't like that's not going to kill the deal later. Come on. Right. So embrace those things and dig in. What's underneath there? Let me see what's underneath there. It'll help you discover additional information. It'll reduce the cancellations. Like I mentioned, you will win more listings on the first meet. On the first meet, stop going on bad appointments, start qualifying, and it'll shorten your sales cycle. Anything that you can add to that? I know you can, Wally, but anything that you want to add to that?
Did you say something? I was listening. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, not really. I think it's interesting. And this is a strange metaphor, but just what popped into my mind. I remember I worked at the front door of the Beacon Hill Pub for about. I bartended there too, but I started at the front door and I held like 300 IDs a night. And it got to the point where when somebody handed me an ID, if it was a fake ID, I could tell it was fake just by holding it, just by having put it in my hand, right? Size, weight, thickness. And then you can look at it, you can tell right away that it's fake. Once you get into doing enough phone calls, like as you're listening, you'll hear things that'll trigger a response like that. You know what I'm saying? And you'll know to ask another question because it just, your spidey sense is tingling. Your brain is, it's going to be looking for things based on the conversations that you're having. So the more calls you make, the better you are at listening and doing what you're supposed to be doing at the outset of your career. Soon enough, when you're talking to somebody will say something to you and you'll be automatically like, you'll hear things that other people won't hear, right? Because your brain is attuned to looking for and hearing, signals that say buy signal, not ready, whatever. Does that make sense? So, but it only comes with a tremendous amount of practice. But it's definitely, that's when you get to the point where you're amazing on the phone when you're on your game, because somebody can say something and you'll be like, oh, that's telling me to do this or that's telling me to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, and that's when you have somebody in your office going, oh, Eddie's just lucky, man. Eddie's just lucky or something. Man, there's no such thing as luck. Preparation meets opportunity. And you have to be looking for, nobody's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, there's a learning moment right here. There's a learning moment. You should learn. Nobody's going to do that unless it's you. And so you have to be conscious to go, man, what did that sound like? And I'm going to tell you, go back and listen to all the people that listed on the first meet. Go back and listen to all the people that canceled. They sound the same. And so the next time you're on the phone and you go, man, this sounds like the person who signed the first time in the first 30 because they sound the same. They share the same concerns. They'll have similar tonality. They'll ask similar questions. And they're not laydowns. I mean, they shouldn't be. There are natural and reasonable concerns that people are going to have. If somebody doesn't have any concerns, that's a red flag. And so I'm looking for that person who sounds like the buyer, who sounds like everybody else. who converted, because I took the time to go and listen to all those so that I could identify what it sounded like in the first place, so then I can recognize it when it's in front of me. And a good way, what's that, Wally?
Nope, I didn't say anything.
Oh. And then this is your favorite document right here. A good way to make sure that you do this every time is to use something that we call the Seller's Counseling Interview Form. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we can share with everybody. I don't have the link available right this second, but before the end of this call, we'll drop it in the chat, and I'll drop it in the Facebook group like we do everything else. But if you follow this process, and this means, Wally, why don't we set a time to meet on Saturday? Wally says, great, that'll work. Awesome. Let me ask you a few questions before I come out there and meet with you. And I start going down the list of questions here, not as in I'm going down the list, make it conversation. I'll take the information that you already got from the previous time spent talking and add it here. If you already talked about what was left on the mortgage, you're not going to ask it again just because it's on the piece of paper. So it's really important to listen and take notes, because the qualifying process can be really easy if you know what you're supposed to ask ahead of time and you find ways to insert it throughout the conversation. So when you get to the point where you say, let me ask you a couple questions so I can be better prepared, there's not a whole lot. And they feel comfortable with it because you got everything throughout the natural course of the conversation. You used what they brought up as a way to ask a qualifying question that you knew was going to come later, for instance. So that all requires listening. And disqualified bad prospects is a goal. By using this, uncover issues that could kill the deal. Again, we want to. I embrace it. Tell me now what's going to keep us from doing business, rather than to just go through like it doesn't exist. Right? Identify all the decision makers. Is there anyone else that we need to include? Is there anyone else that needs to be present? Is there anyone else that's going to be involved in the decision? We need to know how motivated our prospect is, and some of the questions on here are going to help you do that. For instance, on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you to sell this home? Pretty cut and dry. What might keep your prospect from listing with you? That's an internal question that you need to be running the whole time, thinking based on what they've told me, what's the potential obstacle here that might come up? If you do this correctly, you'll understand what those biggest concerns are. You should have a real clear time frame on when they're wanting everything to take place. You'll have a chance to know if you're up against any competition, and at the end of the day, you'll gain a commitment. Listen, if everything that we talk about sounds great when I come out there and meet with you, are you willing to list your home with us on Saturday? And you'll ask that every time, or somebody in your office will. And if you can imagine, if you go through this on every single appointment that you set, would that increase your close rate? Do you have appointments right now that are canceling that this process may have kept from canceling? I'm sure it would. I'm sure that you do. And so when it comes to that, the second challenge is implementing this stuff. So our suggestion would be to print out a stack of these sellers canceling interviews and have them right there within reach. Anybody who's making prospecting calls should have a stack of them. You should have a notepad where you're taking notes on paper, and you're going to type that stuff into your CRM later, but be in the moment when you're on the phone and write down those important things that you're going to want to be able to reference later, and you're going to want to transcribe into your CRM. Have accountability. So anybody who's managing an office, if somebody says, I got an appointment, let me see the seller's counseling interview. If you don't have a seller's counseling interview, it ain't an appointment by my standard. I don't know what you got, right? But it needs to be that kind of attitude and culture so that everybody does it. Eliminate distractions when you're in the middle of qualifying and just in general, right? Don't be checking your Facebook feed as I'm trying to qualify something that could pay me $5,000. Don't chicken out. Don't chicken out when you get to the end and it's time to say, so if everything sounds good, are you willing to list your home with me when I come out and meet with you? That's where rubber meets the road. You either ask that question and you earn your stripes, or you don't. And everybody here wants to have some stripes. Wally, why don't you finish up on this slide and just, we've got 3 minutes. Wrap this up in 3 minutes.
It's pretty simple. Like Jeff said, no counseling interview means no appointment. And the question you don't ask them is the one that will bite you in the butt when you're at the listing appointment. So you don't ask if both people are going to be there. Murphy's Law says one of them is not going to be there. You don't ask them, how motivated they are to sell the home if they're not an 8 and over. Then you get there, they're not ready to sell the home. So you absolutely positively need to ask every question in that seller counseling interview. Even if they choose not to answer, you got to ask it. And if you don't do that, then you're just putting yourself at a huge disadvantage when you get there. Plus, you have to remember, when you set a listing appointment, you're only talking with one person. There's two people in many cases. When a home is being sold, you need the seller counseling interview. So when you get and sit in the front of them at the kitchen table, you can review this data with them. Number one, to continue to build more rapport, but number two, so you can get the input of the person that wasn't on the phone. Sometimes the people in a marriage or couples or whatever, they're not the same motivation to sell. Or some of them think one person might think the house is worth more than the other person does. One person may have a totally different hand in getting the home sold than the other person. And the seller counseling interview just kind of helps you equalize everything and make sure that you know exactly what you're up against when you're ready to do your listing presentation. Less than 3 minutes.
Yeah, awesome. And so, as I mentioned before, transitioning to this is real easy. It doesn't need to be complicated. Let me ask you a few questions so I can better prepare for when we meet. Simple as that. In our role play meetings and everything, we should be practicing using that transition every chance we get. Great. Let me ask you a few questions so I can better prepare for when we meet. Saturday is good for you at 2 o'clock? Awesome. Let me ask you a few questions so I can better prepare for when we meet. Just get used to saying it so that your mouth forms the right, shapes to make it, and it's smooth. I mean, that's how you really dial in your tonality in your scripts, is not by reading them and memorizing them. It's saying it. It's a physical action, just like lifting up weights. The more weights I lift up, the stronger I'm going to get. The more times I actually talk it, the better it will sound. And here's why this won't work. There's people that are going to say, it's crazy, I ain't going to work. Wally and I run into people with limiting beliefs, as we would call them, all the time. And so if you're wondering why you might be going down that path, here's reasons why this won't work. It's you ask questions you already got the answer to, which breaks rapport. So, 2 minutes into the conversation, you told me that you bought this house in 1942 or whatever. And then here at the end, I'm going through my seller's counseling interview and I'm just going line by line. And when did you purchase the home? And little things like that will break rapport. And so that comes from not listening, not taking notes. If you don't do it every time, you'll never make it a habit. You won't build momentum, and it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. If you have weak delivery and no confidence, that's probably because you haven't practiced it. If you have no confidence, people are going to feel uncomfortable answering the information or the questions, or giving you the information or answering the questions. They'll just feel uncomfortable and uncertain, and people don't tend to make decisions or give up information when they're in that emotional state. You can't skip questions, especially not asking the hard questions. If you don't ask the hard questions, it ain't going to work. Anybody can say, so tell me about the home. How many bedrooms is it? How many bathrooms is it? Anybody can do that. If you don't ask, so how much is left on the mortgage, on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you to sell? Do me a favor. Don't make any decisions with anybody else until we've had a chance to meet. When everything is discussed, when I come out, will you list your home with me? I mean, those are the harder questions, not hard by any means, but the harder questions that if I was to look at somebody who's not having success, there's a chance they're leaving out those questions. And if you lose control of the conversation, you're not able to get these questions answered. That's going to cause it to not work. If you ignore the red flags. So let me explain this. And we're coming up on our 3 minutes. I think I'm at it. But this sheet right here is not meant to turn everybody into a great appointment. In fact, in a large part, it's meant to keep you from meeting with the wrong people. So it's meant to disqualify as much as it's meant to qualify. So don't get discouraged if you have what you think is a good appointment. And when you start getting down to the nitty gritty and asking them the real questions, it starts to fall apart. Then walk away. Put it as a nurture. That's exactly what the process is meant to do. Good job on going through it and saving yourself the time of what was likely a bad appointment. To master this, we talked about a role play, make it the standard, memorize all the questions, memorize them so that even if I don't have it near me, I can throughout the conversation naturally bring them up because I know what's coming at the end. Use your notepad, record yourself. We've talked about that many times, Wally and I, how important that is. Listen to your calls, ask criticism from your peers. All these asking criticism from your peers. Man, that's my rock star right there. Whoever does that.
Preach.
What's that?
Preach.
That's it. I mean, everybody else wants to huddle up and then don't listen to me. Don't. Oh, go. All right, man. We'll see. You'll be there 6 months from now wondering why you ain't getting better. The implementation tips, right? If you deliver it with confidence, they're going to answer. If you feel uncomfortable, you're going to make them feel uncomfortable. Your job is to disqualify as much as it is to qualify. You've got to be willing to walk away, and you're not going to accept BS or vague answers. Dig deeper. And remember that they do not know if you mess up. They don't have a copy of your script in front of you. I mean, I've seen stuff, Wally, I know you have too. Somebody will be like, oh, dang, I messed up. Now, I forgot to ask you. Come on, really? They don't know. They don't know. Don't show them your cards. And on that note, man, selling is believing. So we're going to get on to talking about some belief now.